Hello everybody, my name is Will and welcome back to Sprocket. Once again today we're going to be building a first generation MBT. So this is along the lines of like M48 pattern almost, Centurion definitely, T54. You can make arguments for some other vehicles as well, but generally that's the kind of vibe we're going for. Before ERA, before spaced armor, before composites, immediately post World War II. So yeah, we'll see what we can come up with, and fingers crossed it's something pretty interesting, because I'd like to do something a little odd, ideally. But maybe we won't. I don't know. We'll find out. Hi, it's me, everyone's favourite character, post-commentary version of myself. I would like to confirm right now that it's not that weird. Don't worry, if you don't like weird things, it's somewhat normal. However, what isn't somewhat normal is normally what I end up talking about in this segment. And we're just going to start it off strong with, it's very warm at the moment, and last time that I brought up the heat, what I very quickly noticed is that a few weeks later, after the video, and when the weather had changed, I started receiving comments from people on cold days telling me that it's not warm. That's a really interesting thing to comment on like a week's old video. Do people not have object permanence? Do people just not know that things on YouTube aren't live, like happening right then and there? Is that not interesting to you? That's kind of fun. Anyway, see, I just know now. I've said that. Every single comment on this video is going to be like, it's not warm. It's not warm. Even if it is warm, even if it's 50 degrees C, where you are, not F, I know 50 degrees F is cold. Even if, you're still going to comment that, because that's just what you're like. That's what everyone's like. It's what I would do. But I don't leave comments very often, so there you go. Anyway, what are we building today? So, we are building a first generation MBT. So this is a competition that's going on in my Discord, linky in the description, and that is basically just building a first generation MBT. It is obviously meant to kind of elicit designs that are similar in design to the Centurion, the M48, the M26 if you really want to make that argument. There's a lot of argument about what the first MBT was, but early MBTs. Generally speaking, it's your 50s kind of mainline tanks that you're looking at here. And I've picked something to kind of take as my main inspiration, which is, I believe, technically a second generation MBT. It's the AMX-30 was my lead inspiration for this thing, which I'm pretty confident is a second generation, because it is 1966 that the AMX-30 entered service. I think it was roughly alongside the Leopard 1. However, regardless, I don't think anything that I show off in this video is particularly unrealistic to have happened in the 50s. It only uses cast construction. It has a 90mm reasonably high velocity but not crazy high velocity gun with a 212mm of penetration, which is not a spectacular amount of penetration. The armor is 150mm thick. It's not spaced armor. It's not explosive reactive armor. It's not doing anything particularly unusual that you wouldn't expect from a 50s tank. So for that reason, I'm willing to say it's basically a first generation MBT. However, those of you who are stickler to the rules and do want to check, that might not fit the regulations exactly, I've got a rebuttal to you. I'm not submitting it to the competition. Frankly, I don't have time in my week to go back and fix this if I make any mistakes, so it's going to be up here, and then it's going to be left behind, and I'm going to put that under the guise of, hey, I don't want any, bias towards my design. There you go. There's my great excuse for being too lazy to submit a design and then tweak it if anything is wrong with it, rather than just accepting my fate and having it be disqualified, which I know it would be, because I'm terrible at reading rules. Every single time I enter anything into a competition, I do at least one thing wrong. But there you go. Here we go on the hull. Let's get back to the actual tank, shall we? And here's something that I didn't know when I started making this video, and here's something you do know now that you're watching this video, because you've probably seen it in the title. to be entirely honest. Or, if you haven't seen it in the title, you're one of those people who every single time I bring this up comments, I don't read the title of videos. What are you doing? How do you just click based on the thumbnail, or do you just click, like, wildly on your screen? You're just like, I don't really care what I watch. Click. Is that what's happening? I don't know. Anyway, there's at least one person who's told me before they don't look at the title before they click it, which is a wild way to be. Anyway, combat is in this version of Sprocket, which I'll very quickly touch on in a little while in my past self. But yeah, this part of the video was recorded this morning, and this voiceover is recorded this evening. And now there is combat in Sprocket. It happened in the middle of making this video, which is really good, because in the past, back when Sprocket was first coming out, and when I made videos like 3 times a week, sometimes daily for a while, that was really frustrating, because I'd take like a 3-day break or something from making videos, and that's exactly when the updates would come out. At least this time, I managed to fit it in the video that I was working on when the update came out, because it didn't break my tank. That was a definite risk, but I don't think anything's actually really changed other than bug fixes to the building. So, yeah, that was quite fortunate. Okay, we are quite a way into building this hull now. It has taken a long time to get to this point, but I think we're on to something here. I just kind of want to make sure that it looks proportional. I think it does. I think put a big old turret on here with a big old rear bustle. It'll look pretty good. So obviously, some of you probably also already worked this out, but one of my heavy inspirations here is the AMX30. So it's probably going to be somewhat that way looking, I guess. But we'll just have to see how it goes. I made so many messes with the nodes on the hull of this thing. I just kept, doing stuff with the engine deck, which meant that the front was absolutely chaotic. However, in the end, I think the hull looks alright. Obviously, I've just revealed, and I said before, it's meant to look a little bit like an AMX30, so it's not a huge surprise that it's got this very, very angled front plate. Of course, that is definitely something that would be beneficial in this period of time where armor was still, just about how thick of a plate of steel you could get. Spaced armor, reactive armor, composite armor, they weren't really things yet. We were experimenting with them, especially, I want to say reactive armor was pretty close, if not already understood in certain ways, but they weren't commonplace on a huge amount of tanks at this period of time, so steel was ultimately king. And just having a big angled slab of steel on your front of your tank was pretty much your surefire way to ensure that nobody was going through. So it's definitely something that would have been thought about, was how angled this front plate is. And for that reason, I don't mind that it's a pretty crazy angle. Everyone fits inside, the turret fits on top. It makes sense. I tried to greeble this thing really hard. Give me a greeble rating in the comments below once you're happy to, comment on how many greebles have been placed on this tank. If you don't know what a greeble is, you'll know when you're older. That sounds so much worse than it actually is. And so many vents on this thing, in fact. Just thousands of the things. The engine's not even that big, but we got loads of them. Okay, well, you joined me halfway through the building segment, because as I was building this, the combat update came out. So now there's combat. So that's this video as well. Now we're going to be actually able to shoot this thing. At itself, I believe, is the only way that we can do it at the moment, but maybe not. I have yet to actually play around with it. I've literally just downloaded it. And there it is. Now I know that I am going to have to fight other tanks, specifically more of the same tank. There might be a way to spawn in other tanks, but I'm not aware of it. There's no scenarios yet, and there's no other maps still. And there's also a bit of a funny glitch where you can just clip straight through the other tanks that spawn in, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, the combat is interesting now. It's got a lot more depth to it. Individual components can get knocked out. Not all of the components yet have the ability to get knocked out, but yeah, that's obviously something that's going to be worked on over time. This is a very, very, very first iteration of combat with geometric internals, and something that I noticed in the patch notes. Patch, get it? Anyway. Something I noticed in the patch notes is there is no like feed when you kill someone. There is no notification that you've done that, and that is by design on HMmmh's part, because he wants to have a little bit of uncertainty included in the game, which is like, did I actually kill him? Did I do not kill him? I don't know. And I think that could be interesting, but obviously it's going to be a divisive thing, so let me know what you think in the comments, because I definitely feel like that could be a bit of a this is a very Britishism I'm about to say, but it's a very Marmite change, you know? Some people are going to absolutely love it. Some people are going to absolutely despise it. If you're Australian, then you can also use Vegemite as an example. Never tried Vegemite, actually, but I like Marmite, as much of a freak of nature that makes me. So I feel like I'd like Vegemite, because even like English people who've tried Vegemite tend to be like, yeah, it's the better of the two. So if I ever end up in Australia, that's on the bucket list, but I've never been, because it's a really long way away. You can't walk there, turns out. You gotta get in like a boat that flies or something. I don't know, crazy, sounds like the future. Anyway, where are we designing the tank? Yes, we're putting on a little bit of a stereoscopic rangefinder box thing, or alternatively, if you don't like the idea of it being a stereoscopic rangefinder, then it could also just be some kind of I guess the rail on which the gun rotates. I don't know. I was thinking rangefinder, but maybe that's a little bit too advanced for a first generation MBT. I feel like they had that technology then. I don't know if they had the technology to make it small enough to fit inside of a tank, but regardless, it's on there. And you know, I have a bit of a habit of making tanks too small, and that is something that this tank, it's not huge. It's not a great giant MBT. It is kind of like a smallish one. However, for a 40-ton MBT, this is surprisingly spacious inside. It's got 150mm on the side, 80mm on the side of the turret, 60 to 50mm on the side of the hull, 25 on the tops, and you know, I don't actually know what I put on the bottom. I feel like it was 20. But that's a relatively good chunk of armor. That's about what the Centurion had, if I'm not mistaken, about 150mm of armor, and therefore it's got a reasonable level of protection, which is going to take up space on the inside, but we managed to fit 5 people in this tank relatively comfortably. I didn't really have to cram them in at all. It was all pretty smooth. So maybe this isn't too small. Maybe this is just the right size. Maybe, for once, I have built a tank that is of a reasonable shape and size. I don't know. I'm sure some of you are going to have opinions on that, especially if you disagree. But you know, I don't have to care. It's not a legal requirement. I can just ignore it, because you can't tell me what to do. Anyway, before I insult anyone anymore, I'm just wrapping the gun mantlet wrapping the gun mantlet with some armor and making sure that there's a gap behind it, because it really didn't want me to put the cannon on there while the mantlet was not, while there wasn't a gap behind the mantlet, which is a bit weird. I thought it would be okay, but clearly not. But oh well. And as you can see, that Commander's Cupola on top, that is a default size Commander's Cupola, so that should be able to give you, even before I start putting the crew members in, a pretty good idea of the scale of this thing. It's not tiny by any stretch of the imagination, yeah, I think I think I'm confident in calling this a relatively normally sized tank for once. We've also got that massive bit of stowage at the back, which I really think helps shape the rear of the turret. Obviously, cast things can be quite hard to get right, and this is definitely not the perfect cast turret by any stretch of the imagination, but the back of the turret was really where it didn't look so good. So I put this big old welded bit of stowage on there, and then it kind of looks like it's meant to be, rather than just looking like I couldn't be bothered to build the back of a cast turret, which was slightly the reason that I did it, but oh well. And now it's greebling time, baby. We're putting greebles on this bad boy until it looks good. Okay, so we got a general shape for the turret going on here, very AMX-y. However, I believe the AMX-30 is technically a second generation MBT by most people's definition. I don't think there's anything on here that would scream like against the first generation MBT vibe that we're going for, so hopefully this is acceptable. I'm not gonna probably actually submit this for the competition, but regardless, I think it looks pretty neat. It's definitely an interesting shape for a tank, but I think we should be able to fit a crew quite comfortably in here. So fingers crossed we can actually use this thing in combat, and it'll be, not too bad. Okay, so we've got our armor on, as well as a pretty solid appearance. Lots of greebles going on the outside of this thing. I'm pretty happy with how that's come together, to be entirely honest. It's a fairly small MBT. I knew it was fairly small from the get-go, but I imagine as we put the internals on here, we'll probably end up around 40 tons. I wouldn't be surprised, because at the moment we got this diddly little engine. And that's definitely not going to end up being our engine. And now for your last section with future me, or current me, I guess, just not past me, voiceover me. You get your favourite segment, everyone's favourite segment. It's human Tetris. Everyone loves a good bit of human Tetris. This, honestly, easiest human Tetris I've ever had to do. As I was saying, I think this is a fairly reasonably sized tank, and for that reason, putting the people inside was no problem whatsoever. In fact, I think I may have already put the... Have I already put the people in? I feel like I haven't already put the people in. Oh, I guess I have. Maybe I have. Who knows? I don't really know what's going on anymore. But generally speaking, this is pretty much how the tank ends up looking. I'm very happy with the turret. The hull maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. I haven't put people in. There you go. It is human Tetris time. And as you can see, I break the game quite badly. The engine just had no cylinders there. Don't really know what happened, but there you go. It's fixed. Didn't break anything. Didn't crash the game. The save file wasn't corrupted. All was good. And now we have a 10-cylinder engine. I was getting all kinds of weird issues with random things being typed into the controls of, like, the naming controls of all the objects. Turns out, for some reason, my racing wheel was still plugged in, and it was just not playing well with Sprocket. So if you have a Logitech racing wheel, Sprocket is not the most thrilled with that. I think it's something about when you have the pedals in their 0 position, it's actually 50% down the axis, and it gives it... I don't really know. It's weird. But regardless, it's somewhat fixed. And you can see here, look how much room there. This guy is stood fully upright, and he's not even touching his head on the ceiling of the turret. Amazing. And I put 3 guys in this turret for that reason, because there's just so much room. They're not even cramped with 3 of them in there. They're fairly got plenty of room. You could swing a cat in there, but I don't recommend it, because as I've learned, that hurts the cat and you, depending on if you try and pet the cat afterwards. And plenty of ammunition for this bad boy as well. I firewalled the engine deck. We got a 40mm firewall. That's pretty hefty. And in theory, I imagine versus the other tanks in the game, would provide a reasonable level of protection. I then realized that the suspension arms were out the bottom of the tank, and I had to move all of the internals because it was clipping through. But you know, we got there in the end. Everything fits in. Everything is ready to go. and we can go shoot some stuff, which is very exciting because we've not been able to do that for like 4 or 5 months now, and yeah, I cannot wait. I'm gonna enjoy this bit. Okay, I think we are finally done. Now, I may have to do a little bit of file editing to get this thing performing properly, because it does seem to lack just a little bit in gun handling. However, as you can see, we're opening fire on a couple of our own tanks here. Now, we should have no problem going through the side, but the front is a different matter. This gun has about 212mm of penetration, but most of the frontal armor on this tank is 150mm thick, which does mean... I say that, and then we've immediately lost a driver and an ammo rack, but... in theory, it should be quite hard to go through the front of this thing, unless you hit that like lower plate, which is obviously what they hit, and I think that's just what I hit. Looks like I've taken out someone in their turret, which is quite important. Can we completely disable that tank? Maybe? I don't know what's going on. Oh, it's giving me a bit of side angle there. That looked like it went through, but I have absolutely no idea. I'd like to clarify, this is a very early build of combat in the new Sprocket geometric internals, so this is not final by any stretch of the imagination. So any jankiness you see is mostly due to the fact that this came out today. It's like 2 hours ago. Can we take out his engine? That'd be nice. That's definitely killed him. I think his fuel supply might have gone up, guys. Ideally, yeah, I would have liked to still been alive so that I could move, but we've still got one tank who's moving, so maybe we'll be able to, can we swap? We can swap. Oh, hang on, that's them. Oh, we can swap to the enemy tanks as well. That's interesting. But yeah, because of this, I imagine scenarios aren't a million miles away now. Obviously, this is going to take just a little bit of tweaking to get perfect, but after that, scenarios could follow at some point. I don't want to give you a timeline. I don't know a timeline. I've just remembered I didn't actually tweak the gearbox. For a default gearbox, it's doing surprisingly well. I will just have to do that before we give this thing a proper trial. So let me tune up the gearbox, and I'll probably file edit the gun handling to be a little bit better, and then we can call it finalized. Okay, there we go, 37 tons, and we have a slightly better gearbox. It's not perfect, but it does work. So there you go, and we can try and get ourselves a couple of combat kills here. Well, I'm gonna try and hide behind this here little slope, and fingers crossed we don't get shot in the back by our ally, because that would definitely... Oh dear. Well, we're not going to get shot in the back by him, that's for sure. We need to try our best to make sure we're fighting one at a time here. So we're going to hide behind the hill from that guy on the left and try and get through the side armor of this guy. That was a terrible, terrible shot. Come on, here we go. No, that's too low. Well, no, actually too high. We want to aim roughly there. There we go, that works. Oh, no, this isn't good in the slightest. Please, please no, please no. Ooh, somehow we're still alive. We didn't get the gun laid in time, but there we go. He's fluffed another shot. That must have hurt. That must have gone through. I think he may have lost his gunner. He's shooting at the dead corpse of my ally, which is honestly just disrespectful. Gone through the turret somewhere. This is a surprisingly sturdy tank. I really thought it'd be a little bit easier to kill one of these, but no, it's proving somewhat challenging, but there you go. Whew, finally got it done. So, now that that's over with, we can... we can see how this thing goes in a straight line, and I believe its top speed is about 30-ish, 35 miles an hour. We've got a couple more RPM to go here, and yeah, it's not crazy fast. It ended up just under 40 tons, 37 tons, and it only has 427 horsepower. So it's not exactly the quickest, most powerful thing in the world. Realistically, if I had a raised engine deck, I could probably fit something a little bit beefier in this, but I didn't really want to go with a raised engine deck because that is what we've done on like all of our MBTs, so just a little bit of variety for this one. However, the suspension is interesting. You can see that we've only got 5 road wheels separated quite widely, which would mean quite high ground pressure. But the tracks are quite wide and quite long for the weight of the tank, so I think it should be okay. And, I mean, it works pretty well. So, there you go. Do you like this tank? Do you not like this tank? Let me know. Let me know your reasons as well in the comment section below. And, yeah. Feel free to download the blueprints for this thing in my Discord, which will be linked in the description in the Tank Repository channel. You will find this and many, many more tanks if I remember to ever post them after I make a video on them. But for now, that's all we have time for, so I will see you in the future. Goodbye! And as always, a huge thank you to all these wonderful people who are scrolling past the screen right now, who are my YouTube members. We still have loads because of that one Minecraft stream, those 2 Minecraft streams I did, so thank you to all the people who gift subbed that. We'll go back to normal on this outro very soon, I imagine, because not all these people are going to renew.